Hey, folks. Erick Stakelbeck here. Welcome to the Watchman Newscast live stream here in Fort Worth, Texas, just outside of Fort Worth, where we are preparing for what some people are calling Snowmageddon, Texas style. Now, I'm from the East Coast, obviously, a Philly boy, born and bred, and also spent 17 years in D.C. You get snow there, it's not a big deal, but here in Texas, everything is about to be shut down, from what I'm being told. So we'll keep you posted. But interesting times for sure. And always interesting times in the world's most chaotic and strategic region, the Middle East, of course. And yet, my team and I have been talking today, and we said, wow, there's a bit of a lull in the wars and rumors of war. And folks, that's great news. And it comes because Israel has essentially smashed a good chunk of Iran's ring of fire. And yet, we've been talking here on the channel over the past week about two things to watch in 2025. And this could be calm before the storm, I believe, because Syria, number one, continues to be one of the hottest hotspots in the world. That's going to be a big story. The trajectory of that new jihadist government in Syria in 2025 will be a big and recurring story throughout this year. And by the way, on that note, our good friend Yair Pinto, our TBN Israel correspondent, host of the TBN Israel channel right here on YouTube, where he has over 1 million subscribers. He was here with me yesterday on the live stream from the Israel-Syria border, from that very hot spot, boots on the ground. You'll want to check that out, folks, if you missed it. That was yesterday's live stream. Just go to our archives right here on the channel. It's under Newscast or Videos, and you'll find it there from the Israel-Syria border. While you're there, of course, be sure to subscribe and click the notification bell so you get alerts every time a new video is posted. We passed 1 million subs in 2024, a banner year for this channel. All glory to God and big thanks to our watchmen and women on the wall around the world. But we would want to continue to grow in 2025 and beyond with a message of unapologetic biblical truth for such a time as this. Speaking of which, the second big story we've been talking about watching, really three. Number one, of course, Syria, which I just mentioned. Which way will that go? And will that continue to be a proxy battleground as Iran may have been pushed out? But now Turkey moves in, and Israel has created that buffer zone along that Israel-Syria border. Again, check out my interview with Yair from yesterday's live stream. We're also watching, of course, Donald Trump taking office and the very real likelihood of the Abraham Accords being back on the table and a potential peace deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Talk about prophetic, among others. Another big story, but the biggest story, Middle East related for 2025, and we've got new breaking details on it, is the year of reckoning. That's why I've been calling it, for Iran's nuclear weapons program. Is this the year, 2025, where either Israel or perhaps the U.S. or perhaps Israel and the U.S. together strike Iran and destroy Iran's nuclear weapons program? Or is this the year where Iran breaks out and acquires the bomb, announces we have joined the nuclear club, game changer? Or is this the year where Donald Trump strikes, he's the deal maker, right? Strikes an actually credible Iran nuclear deal where the U.S., Israel, the West, and the free world, not to mention the Sunni Arab nations like Jordan, Egypt, etc., Saudi Arabia, they feel good about it. Iran is weakened because Iran right now has no leverage. I mean, zero leverage, folks. Does President Trump take advantage of that and strong arm Iran into a nuclear deal, which is very bad for Iran, which would be the direct opposite of the previous incarnation of the Iran nuclear deal, which was very, very bad for the United States, Israel, the free world, and the Iranian people, who are the main victims of that wicked regime. Don't forget that. Which brings us to our breaking news story today. Iran conducting major military drills along one of those key nuclear sites in Natanz. Now, why would the Iranian regime do that? Why would Iran's elite Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps expend all this effort to surround one of their key nuclear sites and carry out defensive drills? Apparently, the Iranian regime has bolstered, according to them, its air defenses after October 26th and that major Israeli counterattack that we've talked about, where Israel, in a 3-hour bombing run with dozens of Israeli fighter jets, destroyed Iran's air defenses, leaving the Iranian regime completely naked to a future strike against its nuclear facilities. And Israel only improved upon that about a month ago when it destroyed Syria's air defenses. So right now, Israel has a clear path across Syria on into Iran to strike those nuclear facilities if it wants it. And the chatter is increasing, folks. More and more people are talking about this very distinct possibility, especially with Donald Trump returning to office in just 13 days and restarting his maximum pressure campaign against the Iranian regime. Iran is nervous. Iran's leaders, I should say, the Ayatollahs are vulnerable. They've got their backs against the wall, and they're trying to flex today and say, we're not done, and we will not let you strike our nuclear facilities. Here's what we're seeing. This is from the Times of Israel, just reading this straight off my phone. That's why I'm looking down. Iran steps up its air defense drills today, January 7th, near its key Natanz nuclear site amid Israeli and U.S. threats. Here's more. The drills come after Israel is said to have destroyed much of Iran's air defenses in recent strikes. That's that October 26th strike. And the U.S. is examining or has examined plans to attack should Iran attempt to break out and acquire the bomb. Iran's military has begun drills focusing on air defenses near the Natanz nuclear enrichment plant in the center of the country. And it's a big country. As part of exercises planned nationwide, according to Iranian state media. The drills, dubbed Ektator, I'm not fluent in Farsi, or Might, M-I-G-H-T, Might, strength in Farsi, have involved the Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps, which is the ideological branch of Iran's military, alongside the regular Iranian army. The first phase of these joint exercises has commenced under the orders of the Air Defense Headquarters Commander, according to Iranian state TV. It added that Islamic Revolutionary Guards Corps air forces were undertaking an all-out point defense of the Natanz site against, quote, a multitude of air threats in tough electronical warfare conditions, aka cyber warfare, I presume. Maybe system jamming conducted by Israel against Iran's air defenses. And an Islamic Revolutionary Guard spokesman, Ali Mohammed Nayani, said the drills, which will also cover other parts of Iran until mid-March. So this is ongoing because the threat of a strike against Iran's nuclear sites is ongoing. They're being conducted in response to, quote, new security threats. Without elaborating further, new security threats, aka Donald Trump returning to office and Israel eliminating Iran's ring of fire in large part, and Iran being exposed. That's a security threat, all right. Several branches of the IRGC, including the Navy and the paramilitary Basiji forces, will also take part in these exercises, according to Iran. So what you have here is Iran, and it never ceases to amaze me. Iran has been exposed, exposed in the eyes of the world, really like never before over the past few months, since September in particular. We can really take it back to July. And I've said many times that on October 7th, 2023, Hamas actually, which was one of Iran's chief proxies in Gaza, essentially signed its own death warrant. One day later, when Hezbollah began unilaterally and without provocation launching rockets and drones at Israel, Hezbollah also ultimately signed its own death warrant. And I believe that Iran, it's going to be a slower death, but no less painful. Iran signed its death warrant as well on October 7th. It double signed that warrant on October 8th. It triple signed that warrant on April 13th, when for the first time ever, it launched ballistic missiles directly and cruise missiles and drones directly at Israel from Iranian soil. Then it sealed its fate on October 1st, when it carried out the largest ballistic missile attack in military history, launching some 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. So Iran has exposed itself here, and look, the Israeli counterattack on October 26th eliminated Iran's air defense systems. So Iran again laid the seeds for its own demise, as did its proxies Hamas and Hezbollah, as, by the way, did Bashar al-Assad in Syria, another crucial ring on that ring of fire, obviously, by willfully and gleefully hosting Iran and Hezbollah and those various Iran-aligned forces on Syrian soil, allowing Syria to become a launching pad against Israel, and as did the Houthis in Yemen, and that's continuing by launching repeated missiles and drones at Israel. It's like Haman, who, ironically, the story of Esther, of course, unfolded in ancient Iran, which was called Persia at the time. It's a Bible land. Look, Esther, Mordecai, Darius, Cyrus, all these great stories from your Bible unfolded in Iran. Ironically enough, so did the story of Haman, who was hung, he and his family were hung on the very gallows that Haman had built for Mordecai. That's divine justice. And Iran, it's very Psalms 2. Go back and read Psalm 2. Iran, Hamas, Hezbollah, they all had these evil plans against Israel. And the God of Israel, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, quite literally laughed. And he said, "You're planning that, but I have other plans, and I'm going to turn your plans against you." That's exactly what God has done. And now we see Iran bloodied, vulnerable, with its back against the wall, and still, because evil is arrogant, evil is prideful, evil is obsessive, evil is relentless, still not second guessing and not recalculating and saying, hey, maybe we want to shift. No, it's the same rhetoric, the same posture as it has been for the past 45 years when this tyrannical regime came to power. More of the same, more threats against Israel, more threats against the West, more attempts to rebuild Hamas and Hezbollah in particular back up, relentlessly laser focused on the ultimately failed and fruitless goal of destroying the world's one and only Jewish state, because it's a demonic, evil obsession. So we have them today with the air defense drills. We're simulating an air defense drill. I don't know exactly what they're doing, but not by coincidence that they're conducting these drills around the Natanz site. And remember, the Iranian nuclear sites are scattered throughout that country, folks, and many are deeply hardened. They're buried underground. You'll need bunker busters, needless to say, to get to them. The good news about that, if you're Israel, is number one, the U.S. under Donald Trump will be far more prone to sharing such bunker busting technology and missiles and bombs, I should say, not missiles, with Israel come January 20th. And number two, look, Israel's had a pretty good track record with striking heavily fortified, deeply buried sites recently as well. Look no further than the elimination of Sheikh Hassan Nasrallah, the leader of Hezbollah, back in late September, and the elimination of Hezbollah's Radwan force, both in Beirut, both in deeply, heavily fortified underground bunkers. So it is not beyond Israel's reach to do this alone. Now, I don't know that Israel could completely, most analysts say that Israel could not destroy, completely obliterate Iran's nuclear weapons facilities alone, that they need a little bit of help, and perhaps that's a little bit of U.S. help. But I wouldn't be so certain that the IDF doesn't have something up its sleeve. And we've seen God Almighty, the God of Israel, go ahead of Israel, in my view, time and time again over the past 15 months and just secure miraculous, unprecedented, improbable victories for Israel, where Israel's enemies have been put to flight. So I wouldn't be so sure that Israel doesn't have a hybrid strategy, various different means to strike those Iranian facilities. And remember, Israel has excellent intelligence on the ground inside Iran. So I wouldn't underestimate the IDF. That said, if the U.S. is helping, obviously it's a game changer, and it guarantees that Iran's nuclear program will be debilitated and out of commission for a long, long time to come. Some people have said, look, maybe Israel can knock it back 2 years, 3 years. But if you have a comprehensive attack, Israel and the U.S., or in the very least, the U.S. supplying assistance and Israel does it solo, it could set that program back years and years. Well, we may be about to find out. And Iran is desperate right now. And they said, look, that Iranian spokesman I quoted a minute ago said there are new security threats. And indeed, there are. And Bibi and Trump working together is pretty much Iran's worst nightmare. And Ron Dermer, who is the top advisor to Benjamin Netanyahu, a man you've seen on Stakelbeck Tonight, my show, and here in the Watchman. Ron's a friend and a brilliant guy, and I've interviewed him many times. He was visiting President Trump, I believe, in Mar-a-Lago, Florida, last week, recently, and Ron Dermer, who, again, strategic advisor to Bibi Netanyahu, Dermer came away from that meeting reportedly very confident that Donald Trump, in the very least, will greenlight and not stand in the way of an Israeli strike against Iran's nuclear weapons facilities. Now, President Trump, I think it was in October, said, if you're Israel, you got to hit the nuclear, right? I'm paraphrasing him, but he said something along those lines. You got to hit the nuclear. Trump gets it, and he knows it's a non-starter. You cannot have a nuclear Iran blackmailing the world. Look at all the damage the Iranian regime has caused without a nuclear weapon. Imagine if the world's number one state sponsor of terrorism had the world's deadliest weapons. And that's a big question. Will Iran follow the North Korea model? Very dangerous regime in Pyongyang. And all of a sudden, the world stopped talking about regime change there once Kim Jong-un got the bomb, and really dozens of bombs. And then everyone said, well, North Korea is untouchable now. They're a nuclear power. Could you imagine a nuclear Iran, number one, using it because their ideology, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, it's obsessive, a demonic obsession with destroying Israel. So ideologically, they must use it. Their ideology demands it. That includes the United States as well. Israel, in the Iranian regime's ideology, is the little Satan, and America is the great Satan. Their words, not mine. That's their ideology. That's their eschatology. So they're going to use the bomb. They may sit on it for a few years and extract all the concessions they can from the world, but eventually their ideology demands that they use it. That's number one. Number two, that Iranian ring of fire that Israel has largely smashed over the past 3 months, what if that ring of fire, as it rebuilds, God forbid, all of a sudden had a nuclear umbrella? Meaning, okay, Hezbollah fires 100 rockets at Israel. Israel is set to respond with massive airstrikes in Lebanon, and Iran says, not so fast, Israel. If you dare strike our beloved proxy, Hezbollah, there's no telling what we may do in response. Perhaps we'll unleash a nuclear weapon on Tel Aviv. That's the very real reality, kind of redundant, but that's the reality, I should say, of the situation. And it's not outside the realm of possibility. It would give, what I'm saying is this, it would give Israel pause, major pause, before it acted against Iran or any of Iran's proxies, obviously. And not only Israel, it would give the Sunni Arab world pause. It would give the United States and Europe pause. And when it comes to Sunni Arab world, that's point three about why an Iranian bomb would be a disaster. It would spark a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Does anyone want that? You think the Middle East is a bit crazy right now and chaotic? Imagine if Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Turkey were all clamoring and racing to develop nuclear weapons to compete with the new Iranian nuclear superpower. It's a nightmare scenario on all levels. Here's the good news. I don't think it's going to get to that point because I think Israel is going to act first, or perhaps in tandem with the Trump administration. Again, Ron Dermer left that meeting with President Trump pretty encouraged that Trump is committed to preventing a nuclear Iran. I don't believe Joe Biden paid lip service to that notion. I don't believe he was. I believe the Biden administration felt that, and like the Obama administration before it, felt they could contain a nuclear Iran. Well, you can't contain. It's one thing to contain North Korea, where Kim Jong-un isn't talking every day about conquering the world and subjugating the world. He certainly would like to subjugate the Korean Peninsula and his own people. But I don't know that Kim Jong-un right now, not that he'd be opposed to it if he had the capabilities, but he's not someone who's regularly talking about global conquest. Iran, on the other hand, very much is talking about regional and global conquest. So nuclear Iran is such a dangerous beast, and I do mean beast, on so many levels, and it simply can't be permitted. And on President Trump's watch, it ain't going to happen, and certainly not on Bibi Netanyahu's watch. And I can't stress enough the great on-the-ground intelligence that Israel has to prevent that. So we'll see what happens with the U.S. and Israel potentially working together against this Iranian nuclear threat. But folks, this is, I think, the story in the region in 2025. That day of reckoning is coming. I don't know that Israel can resist, that Israel can walk away from this golden opportunity that it has presented itself with by taking decisive action against Iran's nuclear program. I don't know that Israel can walk away from this golden opportunity, maybe a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity, where Iran is so exposed and vulnerable to finally deal with that Iranian existential threat, that nuclear program, which has been like a slow-moving train for 25 years. Some people have compared it to the Cuban Missile Crisis in reverse. This is the time, if not now, when, especially with Donald Trump coming into office on January 20th. Hey, speaking of the U.S. and Israel working together, one item that I thought was interesting, and I'm saying Israel, about time, good for you. Israel is set to locally produce heavy bombs, reducing its reliance on the United States after shipment holdups under the Biden administration. Elbit Systems is contracted to establish a manufacturing plant for raw materials, and in deals worth $275 million, Israel hopes to reach, quote, full independence in munitions manufacturing. Bravo, about time. What have I been saying here since October 7th, when the Biden-Harris administration started with these hijinks of delaying arms shipments to Israel? Again and again, I said, guys, Israel is far too reliant on U.S. armaments and munitions. Far too reliant. When you have an unfriendly U.S. administration, it's going to bite Israel, and it has. Over the past year, the Biden administration at times has essentially blackmailed Israel and said, if you don't do what we want you to do in Gaza, then we'll withhold arms. Or if we don't like what you're doing in Gaza, we will withhold arms. Now, the U.S. was horrifically misguided on all counts, but yeah, they withheld arms shipments. It happened in the time of Israel's greatest need, when Israel's at war on multiple fronts. The Biden administration not only withholds arms shipments, but talks about it to the world, creating the perception, at least, of daylight between the U.S. and Israel in the eyes of our shared enemies. Not very wise statesmanship or statecraft, I should say. But here's more about Israel. Israel said the agreements it's striking, again with Elbit Systems, are crucial for enhancing the IDF's operational endurance and force buildup capabilities, and represented, quote, a central lesson learned from the war. So under the first agreement, Elbit will supply thousands of heavy air munitions for the Israeli Air Force. And under the second agreement, a raw materials plant will be built to build raw materials, where Israel can produce some of its own homegrown, domestically produced weaponry off the assembly lines. So, folks, wise and long overdue. If you're Israel, you can't always assume that you'll have a friendly U.S. administration. I think that's naivete. I mean, look, America is Israel's greatest friend, but we've seen in recent years, both under the Obama administration and the Biden-Harris administration, that things can go sour. And Israel, at the end of the day, can't put its trust in man. It has to put its trust in God Almighty. And ultimately, the God of Israel neither slumbers nor sleeps. He, not the United States, as much as I love the United States, my home country here, as much as I love a strong U.S.-Israel relationship, The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is Israel's ultimate defender. They need to look to him ultimately and trust him and trust his promises to Israel before trusting any other nation state in the world. And if Israel could not trust the eternal, and I do mean eternal promises that God has made to it in his word, then how can any of us trust God's promises to us? As a follower of Jesus, how could I trust that I'm saved, that I'm born again, I'm a child of God, he will never leave me nor forsake me? God tells us all that in his word. And he tells Israel, our covenant is everlasting. I'll bring you back, never to be uprooted again in your ancestral land. It goes on and on. So if you believe that God is a promise-keeping God, it takes the pressure off. Hey, there's still pressure, but at the end of the day, no matter how bad it gets, God is still on the throne. And he will never leave you or forsake you. So I love to see Israel's leaders increasingly have that mindset and that spiritual mindset and that posture. This is a positive development going forward, that Israel is saying, you know what? We can't rely on anyone else. We need to rely ultimately on the God of Israel, God Almighty, and rely on ourselves with God working through us. That is the way forward. Hey, thanks so much for joining us here today on the Watchman Newscast. Until tomorrow, God bless you, and remember, never hold your peace. Hey, everyone. Thanks for checking out the Watchman Newscast. Make sure you hit the subscribe button so you never miss an upload, and tap the bell icon so you're notified every time a new video is posted. And don't forget to share your thoughts, insights, and comments below. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here tomorrow.